Hey everyone, it's Emily, and today I want to talk about modern physical game reprints. Specifically, the problems that I think not enough people are talking about. Now, before everyone comes jumping at me in the comments, I've been a champion of modern reprints for quite some time. I think I first discussed them or pointed them out when they did a reprint for Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Torn to Golden Country on the Nintendo Switch. And I was really excited to kind of share how a lot of these games that were getting very expensive on the aftermarket for modern consoles like the Nintendo Switch, we're finally seeing some reissues and reprints and helping putting a stop to all the shenanigans we've been seeing with resellers and scalpers for modern systems. But the problem really started when we started seeing a lot of these starting to flood the market. And as you can see here, I definitely partook. I picked up Blue Reflections for the PS4, Attack on Titan 2, The Final Battle, Odin Sphere, all those on the PS4. And then we started seeing some more, especially from Koei Tecmo with the Atelier Ryza games on the Switch, as well as a lot from NAS America with the Cruel King and the Great Hero, and more recently with Xseed with their Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 standard case reprints. And I could keep on going because there are a ton of reprints on the shelves behind me, and also games that I may have picked up at launch or close to launch, and also saw reprints that other people were able to pick up. And to clarify, I think it's amazing that video game collectors and people who appreciate physical media are able to get a lot of these games at retail price without having to pay however much money to scalpers and resellers. But there are a few different issues I want to touch on about the modern reprint model that, again, I think we should probably talk about and discuss more, and how that is influencing how we are collecting games. Now, the first point I want to discuss is rather straightforward, and that is kind of critiquing the print-on-demand model that we've been seeing with a lot of these retail games, and how, unfortunately, they're starting to reflect what we've been seeing in the limited print run space, namely through limited run games and companies like that. I've been finding it rather unfortunate that we've been seeing this trend at a lot of retailers where they're not getting that many copies of game at launch. And once they go out of print, they kind of wait to see what is the demand for these games. Now, this print-on-demand model may work for the indie scene where you have a lot of these games that would never reach retailers or regular stores. And so they kind of have to judge what is the demand for this particular physical item so that they could print enough copies for those who want it can receive it. Of course, there are caveats to this, right? Because maybe you've never heard of this game before, or you're new to collecting, and so you kind of miss out on that window of opportunity to put in your demand to receive a copy. But with regular games that maybe are on the more niche side, like JRPGs, we've been seeing a lot of these publishers only release a very limited quantity out into the retail space. And once they go out of stock, they then kind of reevaluate whether or not it's worth reprinting these games if there's demand for them, of course. Now, does this model make sense for niche games? Perhaps, because in the past we've seen a lot of these type of titles end up in the clearance bins, and that's when people tend to kind of wait to scoop them up. But that's kind of no longer the case because of the limited supply that these publishers have been issuing to retailers as of late. And then they're kind of waiting to judge whether or not it's worth it to reprint these physical games again. So unfortunately, we don't see a lot of these reprints happening on the wider market. A few titles have been seeing those, certainly, but a lot of the niche titles like JRPGs and some visual novels and frankly just a lot of games that I like collecting, they end up only really seeing reprints and reissues from a couple different stores. Namely, Video Games Plus out in Canada has really been the driving force for a lot of these niche game reprints. And while it's great that, again, we're able to get a lot of these niche titles and not having to pay above MSRP for them, I do kind of question why is it only a couple or select few stores doing this and not seeing this, say, at Best Buy or Walmart or some of the bigger retail stores that used to carry games. And of course, we've just been seeing this with physical media, just in general, when it comes to scaling back of physical stores carrying physical video games and other type of physical media, and kind of forcing us to buy these items online, which is definitely convenient. However, again, we're kind of limiting the supply only to a select few places, and we're not seeing the larger retail stores carrying a lot of these reprints at all. And to kind of add to this equation, we've been seeing a little bit of a monopoly happening with the reprints. And I'm kind of questioning whether or not other stores are going to join forces and have this become more of a widespread thing where we're not only just limiting to those in the know of where to get these reprints so that then people could buy them up and then resell them, say, on eBay and make a small profit over on there. And to relate this all to recent events, which I'm hoping won't happen, but there's the possibility of tariffs being added to these Canadian stores. And so importing things from there to America, where I happen to live, might be a little bit trickier than it used to be. And it's still all up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen, but we can't ignore the possibility that things are just going to be more expensive to import from a different country, especially things like physical media. So relying on stores outside your region might complicate things and also just be more expensive. So these are just some observations I've had on the logistics side of the print-on-demand model, and just questioning how consumer-friendly are these practices. And on a related note, we've also been seeing this print-on-demand model being adopted by a lot of big publishers who are using companies like Limited Run Games to do the demand and print issuing themselves, rather than letting free markets and retail stores kind of dictate what their prices should be for their physical media. And again, kind of limiting the window of when you're able to actually purchase these items. So that might be a whole topic on its own. I'm mostly side-eyeing Konami, Sega, and Bethesda at the moment for these practices. Outside the logistic side of things and kind of how we are limiting where we're able to purchase our physical media now and at what prices we're able to get it, because I think it's great, again, to get games out retail price, but we are sort of missing out on getting games on sale now, because if we want to have these reprints and we're afraid it's maybe not going to get reissued again because for niche titles there's only just so much demand for them, we're going to have to just buy games at their regular price. And while that's definitely better than the alternative of overpaying for a lot of these games, I do kind of question, just when it comes to just the collecting hobby itself, it's always great to have a good deal. And video games are expensive, especially in today's economy. So it's really, I think, just changing the landscape in a way that I'm not totally sure is for the better. Which brings me to my next point that I think is something that really needs to be deeply considered when it comes to physical collecting, outside of course, the print-on-demand model logistics and how that's influencing our purchasing habits. But rather, well, how do we value games? At the start of this video, I shared a handful of reprints that I've went ahead and purchased over the last couple of years. And I'm starting to question whether or not I'm being heavily influenced by how we perceive value of certain games. Now, to explain what I exactly mean by that, everything has a perceived value. And we usually relate video games to what their MSRP or their original selling price was as kind of their baseline value. And over time, these values increase or decrease that are driven by supply and demand curves. Now, there are plenty of games that people have a higher value of because it's a game that they enjoy and it's one they want to keep in their collection because they think it's a quality product. And then there are other games that we have a lesser perceived value because we don't enjoy them, or they're just nothing that we would consider playing ourselves and maybe enjoying in that way. And with a lot of this reprint FOMO happening, which is a term I think should be probably used more often, I think a lot of these sales that are happening is because of the so-called perceived price of a game once it goes out of print. With people seeing that this game that used to cost, let's say, double or triple what their MSRP was originally, go back to retail prices, a lot of people feel like that is a good deal now because it's something that's more obtainable to get, and it's not at those inflated prices we were seeing before. And so in a way that is sort of making a game have a higher perceived value because of what their resale value used to be, not necessarily based on the quality of the product and whether or not it's a game they really want in their collection or one that they really want to play. Because I think, as we all know, when it comes to a lot of retro games especially, the quality of a game does not always dictate the price of a game. And we've seen plenty of really bad games just have absurd prices. And we've been seeing that a little bit with modern games when really we probably shouldn't have, because again, the short supply that was initially released that drove up those prices due to the so-called artificial rarity of the game. And whenever we have these big announcements of these games finally seeing some sort of reprints, it makes people, I think, more excited to grab hold of them, because now they're really getting a game that used to be absurd and it's within their reach now. And so I think this reprint FOMO has hit me a number of times over the past couple of years. I think my first instance of this was the first ever reprint that I picked up that I was really excited to obtain, because this used to be a very expensive game, and that was for Castlevania Lord of Shadow Mirror of Fate on the 3DS. And this was when I was really big into 3DS collecting, right before I started my channel, and I was just trying to scoop up a bunch of games that I thought were ones that I either wanted to play or I've heard good reviews of and I wanted to experience. And I've always been intrigued by Castlevania, and this game is definitely has mixed reviews because it diverges from the original core concept of Castlevania in a way. But when I saw Video Games Plus advertising this as a reprint on Twitter, I think before Video Games Plus became really the mecca for reprints at the time, I jumped on it. And I even paid for shipping for it, because at the time I think I didn't realize there was some sort of free international shipping threshold. But as you could kind of see, right, it's still sealed. I haven't touched this game, and I still kind of question whether or not this is a game that I could see myself playing in the next couple of years. Another example of a game that I'm kind of questioning whether or not I really needed to pick it up was Attack on Titan 2: The Final Battle. And this is a Muso game, which Muso games are not really ones that I reach for unless it's an IP I really enjoy. And while I did watch, I think, the first 2 seasons of Attack on Titan and enjoyed it for what it was, I still haven't gone and finished that anime or read the manga. So I kind of question, why did I grab this? Is it because of its high aftermarket price and I felt like I need to scoop it up before they disappeared again and skyrocketed in price? Or did I actually think I was going to play this? So those are just 2 examples of games that I'm questioning, did I pick these up because I really had the intent to play them, versus me having a higher perceived value of them because of how much they're going on the aftermarket in the past. I have a few other examples of this, and not so much that these aren't games that I wouldn't play, but ones that I'm questioning, did I really need to own this version of the game? The first one is Odin Sphere here on the PS4, and I actually own this on the PS Vita. And when I saw this reprint for the PS4 version, and I think I also got this on sale, I think the initial supply that Video Games Plus requested didn't sell out right away. And I'm still questioning, do I need 2 copies of this game? Because while I really like Vanillaware and Odin Sphere was a fun game, I played it on the Vita originally, I don't really see myself replaying this on the PS4 anytime soon. Again, I'm kind of questioning, why did I pick this up? The same thing with Atelier Ryza. I love Atelier Ryza. I played this on the Switch, but I originally owned the PEGI version, or the European version of this game, and I wanted to have my ESRB rating on the bottom and my left aligned switch spine. And do I regret getting this one? No, because Atelier Ryza is one of my favorite Atelier games, and Atelier is one of my favorite series when it comes to JRPGs. I don't really regret it, but I do find it a little silly that I kind of just quote unquote upgraded my copy because it went for retail price again. Which leads me to my most recent reprint FOMO buying, and that was for the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 for the PS4. So this is technically the 4th time I purchased these games. And I feel rather silly about it, to be honest. I originally had them on the PS Vita, and I ended up selling those so that I can have the upgraded copies with the steelbooks. So as you can see here, I have these. I kind of regret selling the Vita versions, which is another story altogether, but I was really happy to have the steelbook versions of these games, along with the cardboard boxes that they came with that are on my shelves over there. The Trail series is probably my favorite series of all time, and I was very happy to own the steelbook versions of these, but I also wanted on my shelves back there to have the regular standard cases, which never came out for the PS4, at least in North America. Because of that, I decided to get the PEGI versions of Cold Steel 1 and 2. That just makes me question, why did I get the ESRB ratings now of the standard cases? It was cool that, again, this is the first time we ever saw the standard case for this game, but this is still technically a reprint because they reprinted the disc. It's just no longer in the steelbooks that Xseed had released. And while it's a little silly to be buying multiple copies of these games, even though these aren't even my favorite games in the series, if I had to rank them, they are a little bit on the lower tier. They're still amazing games, but I enjoy other entries of the series a bit more. But I just, again, kind of questioning reprint FOMO, because both of these games for the standard release on Video Games Plus, they had limited quantities because they didn't have an open pre-order for this like they have with a few of their other reprints. And so I definitely felt some FOMO that I had to buy these now, because I don't know if they're going to get more in, because that is the question, right? With a lot of these reprints, even if there's demand at one point, is there going to be demand at another point when it comes to some of these titles? And is there the capability of reprinting these from certain companies? Like, for example, we can't have any more reprints of the 3DS because none of the cartridges kind of exist anymore. And the question is, now that Sony probably wants to move on to the PS5, are they going to allow reprints of PS4 games to continue happening? The same thing with Nintendo and Switch titles. Are they going to really focus on the Switch 2 and not really allow for reprints to happen for the regular Nintendo Switch games? There are a lot of questions, and I think that only just drives FOMO even more, because there's a possibility we will miss out. And we'll be kicking ourselves if we didn't get them at those MSRP prices, because we've seen in the past what actually happened to these games when they were out of print. So anyway, these were just a few thoughts I've had when it comes to reprints, and again, the problem of reprints that I don't think enough people are talking about, both concerning the print-on-demand model as well as reprint FOMO, that unfortunately I have fallen into multiple times, and I'm sure many of you have as well if you are a modern game collector. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you guys' thoughts are on this topic, whether you agree with me that this print-on-demand model especially, is that something that we need to be concerned about as physical game collectors for upcoming modern releases, as well as the reprint FOMO side of things. Is this something that's being driven by the print-on-demand model as well as these publishers and people who are issuing these reprints, or is this kind of more on ourselves, that we need to reflect more on our own collecting habits and not, again, being driven by the perceived value of games, and think more consciously about games we really want to pick up because we actually want to own these and play them? Anyway, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, and until my next video, bye guys.